His scripted lines are showing that he has not even listened to the budget himself. So I will try a different question. Perhaps he can give something that is unscripted to the people watching.
Inheritance, when it comes to inheritance, the vast majority of farmers will be unaffected, as she well knows, as they well know.
You'd think Keir Starmer was prepared for every scenario, yet Kemi Badenoch came out of nowhere, delivering a smackdown so swift it left Starmer seething. What on earth did she say to cause Sir Keir to shut down? And while Starmer's usually the one lauded for his oration, today it's Badenoch with the final word, and Starmer better get used to it. Labour thought they could just increase taxes as they pleased, but Kemi Badenoch was not going to let that slide. What followed could only be described as an absolute demolition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister can plant as many questions as is like with his backbenchers. But at the end of the day, I'm the one he has to face at the dispatch box. And I welcome him, Mr. Speaker. I welcome him back from... Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister back from his trip to Azerbaijan, where he has unilaterally made commitments that will make life more experienced for everyone back home.
Though the confrontation started with some insults, it quickly escalated as Starmer was visibly getting angry. The reason behind his growing frustration was perhaps the way Kemi challenged him with some very difficult questions. Or maybe Starmer didn't like this sudden assault that completely shattered his new budget and its credibility. Kemi was out to make an impression, and despite the high stakes, she wasn't holding back. Whether or not she succeeded becomes evidently clear. Starmer was busy jetting off to other countries for his climate agenda, and Kemi called him out. But there was another point she prepared, one of increased taxes and more suffering for the common Brit. How are they going to fund social care? By the looks of it, Starmer has no idea.
I think the House would have heard that the Prime Minister could neither confirm nor deny whether there was a cap and council tax was being raised. So I will ask him this question. How much extra does he expect local authorities will have to raise to cover the social care funding gap created by the Chancellor's budget and increases in employers' NI? He told the member for Edinburgh West just now that he was covering social care. How much extra does he expect local authorities to raise?
How did she manage to get the Prime Minister so riled up that he continually lost his composure as the questions progressed? Starmer and his Labour Party have a tendency to give vague answers only meant to deflect any questions raised. However, Kemi was already prepared for this and kept pushing for specific details. You might be wondering if that approach worked out for Sir Keir, and frankly, it backfired. Labour thought they could raise the council tax and nobody would challenge them on it. Are they that delusional now? They want to crush small businesses with not just the council tax but some horrid economic rules as well.
He has repeated that number because he has probably not listened to the Labour-run LGA, who said that with no separate funding for the Chancellor's budget announcements, care providers will likely see increased costs, which will cost councils more, and all of the £600 in grant increase he is giving will not cover what is required for adult social care. It is clear that they had not thought through the impact of the budget, and this is the problem with having a copy-and-paste Chancellor.
As if the brutal, to-the-point debate wasn't enough, Kemi had to take it a step further with scathing remarks. A copy-and-paste Chancellor? Will Starmer and the Labour Party let disrespect like that go unchallenged? Either way, things are not looking good for their credibility. They continue to try and defend their budget plans, along with the tax hikes, and it goes as well as you'd think. Kemi's arguing that Labour has no idea what they're doing and Starmer's blindly steering the nation towards a wreck. But how much of that claim is true?
He has confirmed that he does not know what is going on. The Prime Minister probably does not realise that on Monday, the Ministry for Communities, Local Government and Housing revealed that councils will need to find an additional £2.4 billion in council tax next year. That's a lot more than 600 million. I know that he's been away, but did the Deputy Prime Minister, who runs that department, make him aware of their £2.4 billion black hole?
Talk about insult to injury. Not only did Kemi expose Starmer, she continues to back her points up with facts, figures, and a bunch of witty jabs. Is she deliberately trying to get on Starmer's nerves? In an attempt to further humiliate the disaster economic policies Labour conjured up, Kemi had a trick up her sleeve. She uses Starmer's #1 excuse, the supposed economic black hole, in ways that honestly, even Starmer would have never expected.
They say they want all of that, but they don't know how they're going to pay for it. Same old Tories.
Mr. Speaker, even he has to admit that they fiddled the fiscal rules. The OBR has actually said that they don't recognize where the additional growth is going to come from. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the rise in employers' national insurance is going to be a disaster for small businesses around the country.
Just as Rishi Sunak did previously, Kemi aimed to drive home a very simple point about the huge implications and potential consequences of the new economic policies. The concerns are incredibly valid, and watching Starmer struggle to answer them goes to show how out of touch the government is. Did Starmer ever have a plan, or is he just winging it? This isn't anything new, and Kemi knows it. Remember when Starmer and the entire Labour Party were insulting Donald Trump? Well, what are they going to do now that he's the President of the United States of America?
Mr. Speaker, he has nothing to offer except platitudes. And the fact is that they do not know what they're doing. Their ideological budget was designed to milk the private sector and hope nobody would notice. Now his cabinet ministers are all queuing up for public sector bailouts to his tax mess.
Kemi was here to make a point, and she did. Starmer and his party had no plan, and when called out on it, they immediately shut down. It's typical Labour behaviour, right? Come up with something insane, and then, when the backlash comes, try to bail out from it. They've created this tax mess and are getting absolutely shredded over it. But that's just the internal mess. What about how Starmer and his Labour Party have been ruining our relationship at the international level? The things they've said about Trump are nothing short of shameful. What's worse is they might be trying to ban Trump altogether. That's not only childish, but incredibly damaging to Britain. Will Starmer really go further with such a plan?
And so I would like to start by congratulating President-elect Trump on his impressive victory this morning. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologize for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, "Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathizing sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order." And if he did not apologize, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
The United States, now led by Trump, are our greatest allies in almost every sense of the word. In fact, they're our biggest export partners. Kemi came in with a very simple and, as some would say, decent question. Starmer and his Labour Party have been notorious for saying horrible things that certainly don't suit them. Naturally, they've made some rather nasty remarks about Trump, and Kemi is wondering, just like the rest of us, if Starmer and David Lammy will apologize to him. It doesn't just end on a simple apology either. There's bigger problems at play here. Trump wants to impose strict tariffs on imports. Does Starmer have any plan or any clue at all to do something about it so that UK-based manufacturers aren't burdened, but Labour is busy burdening our farmers with the cruel inheritance tax? Kemi lets none of that slide, and Starmer is in for a harsh reality check.
Not distance himself from the remarks made by the Foreign Secretary, and I'm very sure that President Trump will soon be calling to thank him for sending all of those North London Labour activists to campaign for his opponent. Given that most of his cabinet signed a motion to ban President Trump from addressing Parliament, will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking the Speaker to extend?
As Kemi says, it's rather simple, no? All they have to do is invite Trump as a gesture of friendship and not be petty or vindictive about it. Is that too big a task to expect from Starmer and his party of immature, virtue-signaling liberals? They're so blind in their ideological hate that they can't even see the valid points of Kemi and Trump. And Kemi does hammer them on this point. Trump gave excellent advice that European countries should strengthen their borders and increase spending on defense. Much of Europe has listened, but will Starmer listen to common sense as well? Or will he continue to weaken our nation in line with his globalist, socialist agenda?
Mr. Speaker, he does not answer the questions, just read the lines the officials have prepared for him. It doesn't sound like he wants to invite President-elect Trump to Parliament. He needs to look after the special relationship. The US is our single biggest trade partner. Given the risk of increased tariffs on UK exports, which threaten our manufacturing sector, will the Prime Minister commit now to continue the negotiations on our free trade agreement with the US, which the Biden administration cancelled when they came into office?
Starmer is seething in anger over how every nonsensical decision he has taken is being challenged so openly. She's humiliating him with one sharp question after another, and all he can do is give pre-written answers. Really, he's reading off of scripts and not even good ones. Even the prepared answers answers are so vague and wishy-washy that they immediately fall apart into pieces. They're almost as bad as his policies. While it's rather clear what Starmer's stance on our foreign relations with the USA is, his plans for the economy are worse. Really, the budget he and his party cooked up is disgusting to say the least. It's much worse than you and I would have imagined. And Starmer seems to have no clue about it either. Is he a puppet of the Labour Party, or does he just not care anymore?
Mr. Speaker, discuss, chat. He has no plans whatsoever. No plans whatsoever for building on the special relationship. He needs to realize that we in this country rely on our single biggest trade partner. President Trump is also right to argue that Europe needs to increase its defense spending. The last Conservative government committed to raising defense spending to 2.5% by 2030. Will the Prime Minister finally match this commitment?
This brutal assault on Labour's weak plans continues, and Starmer is on the verge of having a mental breakdown. What's comical is that every question Kemi has put forward is incredibly simple and straightforward. It's more of a test of conviction and ideals than anything specific. If the Labour Party stood for its people, it would have been a no-brainer to try and develop better relations with the United States. As Kemi points out, we are dependent on them for trade after all. The next big question about raising defense spending, really, the answer should be simple and obvious. No, it's our security and safety at stake here. Surely Starmer could easily answer that. Well, let's just say Kemi was just as disappointed at his reply.
Mr. Speaker, he will not make that commitment, and yet the world is getting more dangerous. His Chancellor's budget did not even mention defense. The Chancellor's budget last week was a copy and paste of Bidenomics. It turns out that a high spending, high borrowing, high inflation approach is less popular than she may have thought. May I suggest he now urge her to change course, or is he determined to be a one-term leader?
Kemi won't even let the Chancellor sit easily, having already exposed Starmer for being more clueless than a toddler. She had some very interesting things to say about Rachel Reeves as well, quite a few of which had to do with the nickname that the Chancellor earned, Robber Reeves. She ripped apart the horrible budget, and it wasn't very difficult. Who would have thought that blindly spending and trying to ruin the lives of farmers with the inheritance tax was a bad idea? Certainly not Starmer and Rachel Reeves, and they're in for a brutal wake-up call by Kemi Badenoch. How will Starmer defend that abomination of a budget? Will he revert back to his default 22 billion black hole excuses? Well, he decides to do something much worse by challenging Kemi's credibility. Let's just say she wasn't very happy with what he said.
I was the one who raised the minimum wage last year as business secretary. I have a strong record on this, but we need to make sure that we balance the books. His scripted lines are showing that he has not even listened to the budget himself. So I will try a different question. Perhaps he can give something that is unscripted to the people watching.
Lie, deny, be vague about it. That's the standard Labour response that Starmer has become quite the master of. Kemi was genuinely disappointed by the lack of any serious answers or real debate since everything Starmer says is scripted. Of course, she expected this, but seeing the Prime Minister behave like that was rather grim. Is this the man who's supposed to lead us? The same leader who crumbles so easily when asked simple questions? Either way, Kemi is here to do her job and bring the truth to the British public, so she decides to give Starmer one more chance. A final opportunity to show that he's not a clueless drone of the woke and incompetent left. Of course, he fails to do so, but the way he fails is even worse. It counts as either a shameless lie or delusion, and the people will not be happy to hear it.
Speaker, we have heard him repeat the lines on the television, fixing the foundations and so on. But what does he say over and over again? But what does he say to farmers who are facing uncertainty about their futures as a result of the increased taxes announced by the Chancellor? I am very clear that we would reverse Labour's cruel family farms tax. What can he say now to reassure the farming community, who provide security for the whole nation?
Kemi is on point, brutal, and not tolerating any nonsense. Throughout the Prime Minister's questions, she followed this approach of honesty and directness that Britain deserves. Needless to say, Starmer made an absolute fool of himself. She made it seem easy, and perhaps it is easy, but we've never seen such a heated debut by a leader of the opposition. Kemi did not hold back, and this isn't anything new. Before being elected, even as the business secretary, she laid out some scathing remarks and smackdowns to the Labour Party. but none were this brutal. Starmer panicked, trying to come up with an acceptable response, but he miserably failed.
Comes to inheritance, the vast majority of farmers will be unaffected, as she well knows, as they well know. But that budget was about fixing the foundations, fixing the whole 22 billion that they left, and investing in the future of our country, investing in our NHS, investing in our schools, our hospitals, and our homes. And I'm proud that that's the investment we're...
Will the farmers agree with Sir Keir? Given the protests, certainly not. With Starmer dealt with, Kemi sits back down, knowing she has won the debate and a lot more support from the public. Kemi Badenoch says it's her moral responsibility to hold them accountable, and upon being elected, she made it clear what she was going to do. Surrounded by empty speeches and false promises, it is quite pleasant to see someone do what they said they will. Kemi Badenoch might just change the Conservative Party for the better and deliver Labour another crushing defeat.
The task that stands before us is tough, but simple. Our first responsibility as His Majesty's loyal opposition is to hold this Labour government to account. Our second is no less important. It is to prepare over the course of the next few years for government, to ensure that by the time of the next election, we have not just a clear set of Conservative pledges that appeal to the British people, but a clear plan for how to implement them.
Accountability is the most important thing Britain needs today. As Kemi argues, the Labour Party has been allowed to do whatever they please for too long, and what they've done has brought devastating consequences to our nation, be it the economy, the social fabric, or the very foundations of our country. All that we stand for have been systematically targeted by Starmer. They let out prisoners early, failed to do anything about crime and illegal immigration, and have burdened us with countless taxes. Kemi will hold them accountable, but so should you. That is exactly what we are doing, and you can be a great help by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.